Hello and welcome to episode 235 of the Mark and Me podcast. As always, I'm your host Mark. Now joining me on today's episode is the guitarist and singer from the amazing band Asylums. Yes, I'm joined by Luke Branch. Often with this podcast, I get the opportunity to interview many bands, and what I really love is when I have the opportunity to bring a band to people's attention. And sometimes you may have not heard of the band until you've heard them on Mark and Me. And for me, that's one of the best compliments. I see people tweeting, Facebook and Instagram commenting saying, I never heard of this band until I listened to this interview. And I really hope today that many of you discover the incredible band Asylums. Right now, they've just brought out a brand new album. It's called Signs of Life and genuinely is absolutely brilliant. It's only been out a few days, but I've had it on all weekend and I adore it. So when you've listened to today's interview, please go and check it out and then let me know what you think. On each and every episode of Mark and Me, and if you're new to the podcast, you may not know this, I always like to use the intro to touch base and talk about my previous episode. On episode 234, I was joined by Bob and Mike from the amazing band Gwar. I just want to say now a massive thank you to everyone that tuned in. The response was again absolutely fantastic, and I've seen so many comments and so many posts that have just said how much they loved it, so thanks so much. And anyone that's gone and checked out the documentary This Is Gwar, genuinely you're in for a treat because it's absolutely brilliant. But let's get back to today. It's all about the band Asylums, and I can't wait for you to hear this interview with me and Luke. So I think the best thing to do is get straight to it. So here's me and Luke talking all things music. So Luke, thanks for joining me today on the Mark and Me podcast.
You are more than welcome. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Luke, what I like to do for anyone that might be tuning in for the very first time, they might have never heard of Asylums at all. So I want to get them to basically have a good idea about you yourself.
Okay.
So
cool.
Let's take it right back to the early days. Tell me when you were a kid, maybe you were doing a part-time job or pocket money, those first albums that you bought that you absolutely adored.
Well, I was recording music off of pirate radio stations when I first got into music, and I was really into the idea that I was listening to something which was to a degree underground. But I really think I was enjoying that more than the music, just that kind of subversive element to it. And around the same sort of time, I had a friend whose dad was into records and record collecting, and he lent me Electric Ladyland, which I loved but didn't really do it for me. And pretty shortly after that, I was lent Nevermind, which is predictably, an album that's, kind of lots of people, probably reference sometimes. But at the time, I remember just the one main thought I had when I heard that album was every song on this album is incredible.
Yeah.
And then around the same time, I listened to Pills, Thrills, and Bellyaches, which had been out a long time. It hadn't just come out or anything. Both of these albums had been out a long time when I heard them, and I felt the same way about that album. But I was really drawn to the lyrics on that album a lot, and I think those two albums, the kind of just songwriting on Nevermind and the kind of lyrics and packaging, actually, and just the whole world of that Pills, Thrills, and Bellyaches record just drew me in. And I think, yeah, they were the two that really just sort of got me interested, firstly in record collecting, but then a little bit later on, but not too later on, actually playing guitar and starting to try and write songs.
Nevermind was an amazing album for me, and I remember even at the last stages of primary school, I had a pencil case and I remember carving into it with a compass the little smiley Nirvana Nevermind, the little yellow face. And I can definitely, I'm not trying to sound cool, I really did listen to them at the age of sort of 10 and 11, and my parents were good enough to kind of send me off to have guitar lessons, and the first thing I ever learned was Polly on the acoustic, because it's 4 chords like most Nirvana songs, but it made me realize that I could play songs like my idol at the time, Kurt Cobain, that weren't that complicated.
Yeah, I had the same experience. It's kind of like, maybe I'll get a guitar, and then I sort of taught myself to play it, and the 4 chords thing was definitely a big factor. I had the same sort of feeling, to go back to the Happy Mondays thing as well, was just like that it wasn't really singing that I was listening to. It was just some ambiguous other thing that was happening. Wasn't really rapping, it wasn't really singing, it was just expression in some way, shape, or form. So found that quite empowering as well.
I mean, as far as gigs go, I think it's then that realization that the record you've bought can actually be played in front of you, and it blows my mind when you went to these early gigs. For me, Green Day, it was on their Dookie tour. I got to see them at Wolverhampton, and I was like, fucking hell, like how are three people playing that song so well, so tight, and just like the tape that I had bought in my Walkman on the way. Can you remember those first gigs you went to where you were like, I don't know, maybe your ribs shook and the hairs on your neck used to stick up and you used to think, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I was always a bit I still am to a degree, quite shy, and I didn't go out a lot when I was growing up. I used to draw and listen to music at home, and just generally try to stay out of people's way for quite a few years at school. But then a friend of mine actually ended up being in the horrors. We were friends at school, and we went to one of the early V concerts, which was in Essex. And even though it's kind of a commercial festival, not that I had any grasp of that at the time, but Beck was like the penultimate act on the bill, and it was the Odelay period, and he had this colourful backdrop thing. And I remember the DJ that was on stage scratched Smoke on the Water, and he was like doing the splits, and just like it was this mashup of like almost like Beastie Boys type, kind of organic looped stuff with like a great band, and then this sort of almost like James Brown quality mixed in with that. And I was just like, what is this? I love this, and just love the visual presentation of it. And then it was I think the Prodigy were on afterwards, and I remember kind of Keith Flint jumping into the crowd at the beginning of the set and just not getting back on stage for the whole set, more or less. Just was torn to shreds when he got back on. And just don't know, for me, just like I grew up in this really quiet town, just which was nothing more than just like car showrooms and just like the woods and just nothing really, just this nothing town in Essex called Hadley. And for me, it was just like, wow.
I was at V on that same year, but it was at Western Park. They did it over two different
Yeah,
sites, didn't they? And there's bands like I think like Travis and Faithless and all those sort of indie bands over the last kind of 2 or 3 years. And God, I completely forgot about V Festival.
me
Honestly,
too.
it's like it was good fun. I know it was a bit commercial, like you said, but I loved it. I love the fact you could go and see sort of Coldplay and Radiohead and all these bands that were not quite, had not quite got to the realms of what they are now,
Yeah, I was, kind of, and having it like in Essex. I don't believe there'd been anything on that scale in Essex in that era, and it was like 20 minutes or so from where I lived, half hour from where I lived, and yeah, just it was just inspiring, really. I mean, like I remember because we mentioned Nirvana, I think the Foo Fighters played that day, and it was like the Color and the Shape era. Pat Smear was in the band.
Wow.
I know he's again now, but he left for a while afterwards, I believe. And it was just like, yeah, for me, I was like, oh my god, like that's Dave Grohl. Like, I can see him in real life, and it's too much, man. I also remember kind of getting a lift to that show and with Reese's parents because he was already there. He had the 2-day ticket, and I was just slumming it with the one day. I went with his parents, and we listened to "Forever and Ever Amen" by Ben Folds Five all the way there. And I remember thinking these are great songs as well. So,
Yeah.
but that was their record collection, and yeah, it was kind of like a magical 24-hour period. And then I went back to work at Iceland.
And then it's like the kind of reality kicks in when
Yeah,
someone's coming and asking you what aisle the frozen prawns are on.
yeah, of which I wouldn't have had any idea because I wasn't paying attention for the entire duration of my tenure.
So at what point did it become a reality that you wanted to then, I mean, you said that you weren't very confident at school and you're quite shy, but what point is it you're thinking, do you know what, I want to get with some like-minded musicians and start having a jam? Were you that guy at school that was in Battle of the Bands or college, or was it a bit later on?
I kind of was in bands at school, but I never had a kind of prominent role. I kind of started playing. There was like a little group of us, and everybody was playing, and I'm quite young in the year, and I started playing a bit later than everyone else, but seemed to have like an abundance of enthusiasm, and kind of a weird interest in sort of like I would be like looking up like kind of record labels. I remember going up to foods offices and sort of getting interested in that, as well as bands and just this whole exotic world of music that was in London, and I was so close to London. But to answer your question, so I wasn't a prominent member of any of those bands, but then I did a project for a very short period of time. It was like a studio project, and a friend of mine started managing me and sent it to In the City Festival, and we got selected to be like one of the 50 bands to play, which sort of at the time was quite a big deal, and sort of meant that maybe you were one of the 50 best bands in the country or something,
That's
or
awesome.
at least it felt like that's what it meant.
Yeah.
And I was so young, I just didn't know shit from clay, man. So I just was like, wow, really? I don't even know what we're doing. But I had written the songs in that project. And I sort of we went and did it. And I remember getting hit up by Deceptive Records, who had done the Elastica and Idol, and I think the first Idlewild release, and they were sort of expressing some interest shortly before the thing imploded. But I kind of got my kind of little dream of maybe like being involved in some way, shape, or form in a slightly more uh, you know v- exciting world than the world of my hometown. I sort of got a little glimpse at it, and I was interested, to say the least. So that's kind of where I started to develop a more serious interest in maybe doing music long term. But I have to say, my dad's a painter, and for me, it's creativity is like at the core of my being. I just sort of through the years, I just explained to you, I kind of like pivoted from being more interested in visual art and probably better at visual art. I ended up just like switching at a point and just focusing on music and poetry. And it was a slow kind of transition, really.
So, as someone who's been quite open and honest with me today and said that you still are quite a shy person, it's probably easier to hide away than go out and show your face to the world at times. Being in a band and being the front man and the vocalist and guitarist, do you find it a struggle to kind of be the face of the band and go on stage? And you've talked about some of these bands like Keith Flint, who's in the crowd, and you obviously want to leave an impression, but that must be a battle if you kind of sometimes are a bit like a bit more reserved and don't want to be out there, you know?
It's a really hard question to answer, if I'm honest, and I'm still trying to unpack it mentally, um, because there's like two components to it, I think. I love creating things so much that I'm willing to put myself through it
Yeah.
in order to make so to give to put life into the project, and to and I probably wouldn't be necessarily suited to doing solo work in the traditional sense, because I like to be among a band, and I'm fairly happy if someone else in that band is seen as a more central figure than even I am, and I play in another band too, where I take a secondary role, and I do film soundtrack work where my personality isn't up front and center, but I really do like the craft of performance as well, and I sort of see any participation in the public space as performance,
Yeah.
and and if I can frame it that way for myself, then it's not really me in some ways. I can kind of step into
Switch
some.
off and kind of switch into a different kind of, not even just a thought, but as a, I don't know, like a different persona, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's. Do you remember that great album by Mogwai, "Come On Die Young," that starts with
Unbelievable album.
love that album. It was a big one for me growing up. Kind of got me out of the '90s. Um, in one record, I think I bought a Square Pusher record the same day, so those two together. But
Wow.
anyway, I mean, yeah, just there's a quote from Iggy on the first track, isn't there, called Punk Rock, and it says, it's a space where you don't feel pleasure and you don't feel pain, and I can identify with that.
So what do you do differently? Do you tell yourself that because it's part of the overall creativity of being in a band and being a songwriter that you kind of just you've got to do that? You know, it's part of the job.
Not in a chorey kind of way. No, it's more
No.
like I have a ability, and I always have had the ability to switch off and just go on instinct. And I do that when I'm writing songs or painting or drawing, and I just do it when I'm on stage too, and just forget everything really. And I get a lot out of performance for that reason, really, because it's just very pure escapism. And sometimes something real will happen that, like I'll not, my bandmates will testify to this. I'll often like knock a drink over, or like pull my guitar pedal out, or from time to time something like that will happen. And it's just because I'm just in another realm, man. And I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. I've never said this to anyone, but in my formative years, I used to swim for Essex, and then I took it to a national level right up to the age of about 14, and it was a solitary thing. But with swimming, you have this kind of like submerged sensory deprivation thing, where like your ears are
Yeah.
kind of kind of you don't hear things quite properly, and you can't see things quite properly, and you're just in this inner realm. And like I would say that like when I play music, I sometimes go somewhere which feels like it was when I used to do that, which is this sort of just interzone world,
Yeah.
which is, and I'm not overly conscious of certain things, but I find it really rewarding. I've really missed it through the last few years when it's not been possible. So yeah, it's just a switch really, just to kind of, it's just that I'm able to just access some for some reason.
And as a band, is your mentality to kind of get as many shows as you can? So I know you're trying to always make a name for yourself and get heard by a new audience. So any kind of support slot, do you try and do everything you can that even if it's just one or two people that night, buy a t-shirt or a vinyl or go home and just go on Spotify and listen to you? Are you always trying to use any opportunity to get heard?
No, not really. I mean, Asylums is a strange project in that regard, and so is Cool Thing Records, which is the label that we formed in conjunction with the band.
Yeah.
And so we had done other projects, and toured, and been part of, I would sort of like describe it as the more centralized music business. And Asylums was born out of failure in some regards, although that has a negative connotation to the word failure. It was like we hadn't kind of succeeded in our individual personal missions in other projects to kind of make it our job, I suppose. And the ecosystem of being an artist in music had metamorphosized into something unrecognizable from when I was a teenager, and it required lots of different things to make work. And when we started Asylums, the kind of basic thing was we wanted to get back to playing music for the same reasons that we started playing music, which was to have fun, only to have fun, and to pick it up and put it down as we saw fit. And so that's where the label came from. I saw it for me as like my ultimate attempt to try and create music that was like in line with my taste and in line with my ability, and wanted to do it with friends and collaborate, and hopefully it meant to them what it meant to me too. So we did that, but we formed in a very strange way where we kind of had these duo meetups, and then I just remember the first time we got in a room as four of us, we played like a 12-song set, and it just sounded really good and it wasn't premeditated. We didn't work at it. It just slotted together just like this perfect puzzle. And ever since, really, the reason I'm giving you all this context is we just tried to stay true to that, like kind of genesis of it. And I've described it this way in the past, but I'll do it again. For us, it's like a kind of an art exhibition type thing that we don't mind paying for materials for, but we don't expect to glean a living from it. And we don't expect really anything other than to try to make more work. And that philosophy has kind of bled into how we view the label and how we built the roster there. And we do an arts advocacy radio show called Cool Thing Presents on Soho Radio, which is in line with those values too. So in terms of trying to maybe climb up an imaginary ladder towards like mass appeal, those years are gone, and we just want to leave a good body of work, really, I think, is at the core of it.
Do you know, that sounds really healthy, because I interview bands every day, and I've been in a band, and everyone strives to be that headline act at a festival or get 1 million downloads or streams. And it's so refreshing to hear you basically not give yourself all these targets, or kind of as a band have to kind of get milestones. You're doing it because you want to do it, and there's no expectations for the four of you. You're just producing work you want to produce on your terms.
That's the genuine truth. There was a moment on the first album where we were so unbelievably shocked by what was happening. Like we decided we took it so far, that we didn't even want to do social media. I even put the term post social media in our press release, and created this weird thing where we made a demo tape that you could download from a website, and it had my phone number on it, and I had major labels calling me, and like it was just like, honestly, you couldn't, if you'd have planned it KLF style, it wouldn't, it couldn't have gone any better in some ways. And it was just so jarring, and I couldn't believe we were being played on the radio. And it was so, there was a moment we were like, maybe we should, should we, change our philosophy on things? And there were a few months where we wrestled with that. And then we ultimately kind of thought, no, we know what will happen. We're not cut out to headline festivals. We're not cut out to tour endlessly. We're certainly not cut out to sort of almost bring more people into the creative process in terms of quality control or input, unless they're friends. And so we just tried to keep working with people we would consider to be friends, and just build the infrastructure, build out from that idea.
I love it. It's really refreshing to hear, and I think it means you'll carry on doing it when you want to do it. There's going to be no pressure, and for that reason, you haven't got that kind of worry of, oh shit, we've got a label ringing us and we need to get a song out by next week. You can just do it, and just enjoy it. Take the best bits of being in a band without all the pressure.
And you can take kind of really extreme risks as well, which I've found enjoyable.
Yeah.
And also nerve-wracking. On the last album, we got a PRS grant, the Momentum Fund, and that sort of enabled us to make a record, which we did the recording with Steve Albini in Chicago, and then we kind of marketed it using some of that budget and stuff. And then on this record, Mike and I, in the label, pulled some sort of things off, which allowed us to have some capital we weren't expecting to have, just through doing some kind of work in other areas of the music business, which was great fun. And then so we were able to sort of like bring a string quartet in for Signs of Life on 4 tunes. And, on paper, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, these are, I remember the day that we recorded the strings. I think my personal, kind of financial risk that day was approaching, was well over £1,000, and I'm not a rich man. So, but it all worked. We planned it out, and we were able to execute it with Dave Ehringer's help. And so I only give you all these things because I really can see now, like in the history of music, where people have been able to do things their way. Good things can come out if you can just be, if you can just sort of dream it up and then just not bottle it, and I kind of think back to sort of bands that I loved when I was young, and I love the idea of, after all the failure of Paul's Boutique, for the Beastie Boys, that they regrouped and created
Unbelievable,
Grand
isn't it?
Royale, and then just created this whole chapter, which is superior, in my humble opinion, to the even the music that had come before. It was such a great run of albums they had when they had their own studio and stuff, and you know, it's just one example, but I feel like a lot of good stuff can come if things stay pure.
And to get into work with Dave Ehringer, I mean, he's done. Was it Manic Street Preachers? That's the first.
He has worked with Mannix,
He's produced with Mannix.
yeah,
Yeah. What a great talent to work with.
yeah. He's been a friend of ours since I was, maybe 18. Mike, who plays bass in Asylums, and I had both recorded with him in different projects, and we'd maintained friendships all through the years. And um, I think because of the pandemic and everything, we started thinking more about a studio record, which may or may not have been toured heavily, and we were thinking about like REM and how they did great work with like Out of Time and Automatic for the People, and like how they didn't tour those records, they made them like really studio things. And we were thinking about who we would work with, and Dave's got this, he's amazing talent. He's got a great relationship with Rockfield. He knew a string section. I tried to explain what we wanted to do, and then he just helped us put that whole scenario together. And and because of the pandemic, I think not just the musical choices which I just mentioned, it was also an opportunity for us to reconvene as a band. And Dave is like family to us, so it when we did it really did feel like just like some sort of medicine, like just to get into the countryside and to have these like experiences musically that were a bit different to what we'd done in the past, and be surrounded by cows, and just to eat dinner together. And it's just what we all needed, really, I think.
Like a big family project.
Yeah, maybe it doesn't sound too rock and roll or something, but like I was craving it so much, and I know the others were. It was like so much isolation, so much kind of same four walls. It just felt like, do you know what I mean? We've been in a Tupperware box for a year, and then all of a sudden we were just, kind of out in the open air again and stuff. And that was a beautiful thing and it offered a real contrast to going to Chicago and recording, albeit just as exciting and cool, but it was almost the polar opposite scenario, musically and in terms of environment.
I lived in the city for 20 years, and over the last couple of years, I'm now literally in the most rural part of Shropshire you could ever
Amazing.
imagine. And I'm not lying to you, it's the best therapy, it's the best healing of any way, mentally and honestly. There's nothing better in the world than being in the outdoors where there's a field and I can just walk with my wife and the dogs and just
Yeah.
relax. And there's nothing better for my soul if I can get to go to the beach, which isn't too far away, and walk along the sea. It doesn't sound rock and roll, but I'd never in the world trade that for America or city life again. This is the way that life should
I
be.
can really relate to what you're saying, man. It's like, I don't know, it's just changed things. I used to, I couldn't wait to get up to London, and, get into the, kind of action, if you want to call it that. But yeah, I stayed in the countryside over the summer for a few weeks, and I took my son swimming in the ocean. And I don't know, man, just like,
Nothing beats it.
and you can, I just write music still, kind of, be productive. It's nothing to do with productivity. It's because it's got everything to do with just trying to find some peace, just trying to find
It
a bit of
is.
peace in your soul.
Nothing's a battle either. Like I can just go to the shop. I haven't got to worry about battling to get on a train and everyone being really rushed and sweaty and hot and everything's at fast forward tempo. And I'm like, I can do what I want when I want. Honestly, it's the most healing thing I can ever recommend is just walking along a beach or going for a walk. And it sounds so lame. I'm 40 years old, but I fucking adore it. And I wouldn't honestly swap it for
Do you
anything.
meditate?
I've done yoga over the last sort of 6 months. Me and my wife go once a week, and I get to switch off. And I find it the only time that there's no one asking me a question, or I'm not wearing headphones, or I'm not listening to music. And it really opened up my eyes to the first time that I could switch
Yeah.
off. And people think switching off is just sitting in front of Netflix. That's not switching off. You're then absorbed into a TV show or what's going on or the plot. It's switching off where you can hear your own heartbeat. You can see your breath. You can be aware of how much you're inhaling. And that's done me wonders, but not proper meditation. I've heard a lot of people. I had Incubus on recently, and Brandon Boyd was talking heavily about it. But it's definitely something that I know is the next step for me.
Oh well, yeah. I could thoroughly recommend it, and but like yoga's great too, and you know, as you described, you creative as well, and it's like, and you're right, sitting in front of Netflix is fine and everything, but it's more input, and it's like I'm someone that if I don't work at it, I'm not in the moment. Like I said
Yeah,
at the beginning with that switch off thing, I can something's like on my mind that's like troubling me. I can disappear into an imaginary world of just that problem, and be there for a while, even, and my life's just playing out in front of me. And I can also do it with positive things too. And meditation's just like almost like an anchor at the beginning and at the end of the day to just make sure that I'm not missing what's really happening. And it's a huge it's a benefit it's of benefit sometimes when you're being creative because you disappear into the thing that you're doing. But it's really important to be present, isn't it? And I think yoga,
definitely.
meditation, and if you can't even, maybe even not even just that, just like walking and just no input for a moment, more. Yeah,
Just sit in a room for 10 minutes. 10 minutes doesn't sound
yeah,
long, but it is when it's just you and you're not doing
yeah,
anything. And I mean anything. Don't then pick up your phone and look on Twitter. I'm talking switch everything off and just sit there with
yeah,
yourself.
yeah. And I don't know how you find it, but I always come back to whatever I'm working on with the answer, but I don't look for the answer during the meditation. It's just
So fucking true. Like I'm not aware of that until you say it out loud, and then I realize, like, oh, I can't do this edit. I'm sick of it. I've been doing it for too long. Go away. That's not my purpose. Go away to try and find the solution, but it comes without even thinking about
that's
it.
exactly it. And if you spend a lot of time doing creative work, it's just like a really great tool. And it's just really great for overall well-being. And I'm completely like straight edge, so it's like, it's nice to have something, it's like,
Yeah.
there's just a place you can go.
Yeah, I'm vegetarian now. I don't smoke any weed anymore. I haven't for years. A drink is literally just I haven't been drunk for sounds so boring now. 5 years. I'll have a casual beer or cider at a weekend just to have as a luxury, and my life just feels a lot purer. And to be aware of my own thoughts and not kind of let them go elsewhere because of toxic or other stuff. Honestly, it's I need to be like this. It's the only way I'll survive now.
Well, power to you, man. And like, I don't know. I've just noticed that kind of since I don't drink or anything like that, like my appetite for, the kind of things that I used, reading, listening, stopping, has only just got, more like richer or something, but I don't have anything against any of,
No, of
the
course not.
craziness and all that, and stuff, I've been there, done that, but something has certainly shifted for me, and like, I, 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 I think, maybe having a child as well sort of gave me a different perspective on the future, and it's a nice reason to try harder to be the best you can.
It's nice to hear, and it's also nice to say it out loud, isn't it?
Hopefully, your listeners, well, just,
They've turned off
yeah,
10 minutes ago. They're like, oh, they're not talking about being in a band anymore. Fuck these
no,
guys.
like being in a band is great. Rock and roll, kind of carnage. is an acquired taste, and some people would dig it, some people won't dig it.
Exactly. And I still love going to gigs. I go to festivals. I feel old now. I went to Leeds this year, saw Arctic Monkeys, and I felt like people were about to say, "You're here to pick up your kids." I'm like, no, I'm here to enjoy the bands. But
Yeah, yeah. I've kind of reverted back to my teenage self of being, quite a homebody, and I can't wait to go out and play some shows. We've got, Rough Trade. He's
yeah, you
going,
got a busy week next week, haven't
yes,
you?
kind of, and I'm all for it. But I had a rehearsal a couple of nights ago with the guys, and Henry lives in London, and he comes all the way down here, and we rehearse, and sometimes I go up there, and it was just a great night, just even rehearsing, but running the label and stuff as well over the last 8 or so years, but particularly this last year, it's kind of there's been a lot of like logistical kind of like, I was thinking today, like, because someone asked me last night in a different interview what things were like, and I was like, it's kind of like Purple Rain if you take out all the scenes where he's at home writing and like splice in Darren Aronofsky's Pie into those scenes,
Fucking
so it's kind
hell.
of like a lot of like at the computer analysis and all, kind of trying to solve problems, and then then the gigs.
That's amazing. My final question for you today, and I do this with everyone that's been on the podcast. There's over 200 people now. I ask the guest to pick the outro song, so it doesn't have to be one of your own. I find that quite arrogant if a band's like, "Okay, I'll pick my song." I'm like, "Fucking hell, you can pick anything you want," but it's either a song or a piece of music that means a lot to you. Now, once all this is edited and out there for the world to listen to, that final piece of music will play after I've done the outro. It's very personal because it's your choice, but if you think about it too hard, I think you won't be able to whittle it down to just one. And as a musician, you've probably got 20 in your head right now. But is there one that comes to that forefront that's really important to you, that when I asked the question, maybe it was the first one you thought of?
I do have two, but I'll stick with
Okay.
one.
We can toss a coin if you
That's
want.
cool. Yeah, like my go-to is like Blue and Green by Miles Davis, but I'm gonna go with the Ballad of Dorothy Parker by Prince, which is one of my favorite pieces of music.
Unbelievable.
Just totally weird, squelchy, nocturnal, otherworldly, strange imagery in the lyrics. Weird, but great tunes.
Weird's the word. And I love that because people will listen to that and go, "What the fuck?" And then you listen to more Prince and be like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, right. It's kind of like I don't know. I love all the high ends rolled off everything, and I think there's some mistakes in the recording from what I've read, and it just sounds amazing.
But I love that. I love the fact there's errors. It's human, isn't it? It's how it should
Yeah.
be.
Joni was singing, "Help me! I think I'm falling." The phone rings, and she said, "Who's calling?" What a weird lyric.
Fucking amazing. I'm gonna listen to that. Well, I'm gonna listen to it anyway because I'm gonna put it on this in this episode. But that'll then send me down a big Prince fucking probably weekend of listening. But honestly, dude, this has been quite deep, quite heavy, and I love that. And I wasn't expecting this, so thank you so much for
You're
coming on.
welcome, Mark. Thanks for having me.
So there it is. There's my interview with me and Luke from the amazing band Asylums. And as I said at the start of today's interview, their brand new album called Signs of Life is out now. It's really good. Go and buy yourself a vinyl. Go and listen to it however you can. Stream it. And if you get an opportunity to go and see them live, and they don't play often, go and do it. Because honestly, they're one of the best bands out there right now. I thought Luke was an amazing guest and we hit it off straight away. I loved his chemistry, I loved how deep and how honest he was with me and really trusting in me. And this for me makes a great interview, and I really hope we can get Luke back on the podcast in the very near future. If you've enjoyed today's episode, these podcasts will and will always be free. But all I ask in return for you listening today is to share it on your network. That could be Facebook, maybe Twitter, or even Instagram. I keep saying it on every episode because it's crucial for Mark and me to get the word out there and costs me absolutely nothing. So if you're on Twitter, why not just hit that retweet button when you see this episode? Why not on Facebook put it as your update or share it? And why not on Instagram just put it on your stories? It really goes a long way, and each and every week I see more and more people doing it. Don't think I don't notice these things. And then I see loads of new people following, I see loads of people checking out the podcast, and for me, that's the best way to get the word out there, so please keep on doing it. I also have a Patreon page, and to allow the podcast to be on stuff like Amazon, Podomatic, Spotify, it all costs money, and for doing that, I have a Patreon page. It's literally on the link of markandme.com, and for as little as £1 a month, you're guaranteed at least 2 episodes a week, an exclusive badge as soon as you sign up, some announcements straight to you before the general public, and starting this month, yes, you're going to get an exclusive episode just for being on Patreon that the public won't hear, only you guys at home. Also, thanks to my good friends at Richer Sounds, I have prizes that I get to give away each and every month, and that's just to say thank you for supporting the podcast. So the link is on markandme.com, and genuinely, I really need all the support I can get, because this podcast earns no money, and it all goes right back into the podcast if you sign up. I'll be back in only a few days' time with a brand new episode, so until then, please look after yourself, take care, listen to Asylums, and I'll speak to you all very soon.
Dorothy was a waitress on the promenade. She worked a night shift. Dishwater blonde, tall and fine. She got a lot of tips. Well, earlier I've been talking stuff in a violent room, fighting with lovers past. I needed someone with a quicker wit than mine. Dorothy was fast. Well, I ordered, yeah, let me get a fruit cocktail, I ain't too hungry. Dorothy laughed. She said, sound like a real man to me. You're kinda cute, you wanna take a bath? Do you want a bath? Oh, I said cool. I'm leaving my pants on, cause I'm kinda going with someone. She said, sound like a real man to me. Mind if I turn on the radio? Oh, my favorite song, she said, and it was Joni singing. Help me, I think I'm born. Phone rang and she said, who ever's calling can't be as cute as you. Right then and there I knew I was through. My part was gone. She was blind, and fiction wrote home by witch's curse. Dorothy made me laugh. I felt much better, so I went back into the violent room. Let me tell you what I did. I took another bubble bath, my pants on, all the fighting